Now, Cincinnati Connection, connecting you to your community.
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Cincinnati Connection. I'm your host, Sharice Gibson. A lot coming up on the show this morning, but we begin with a candidate for state treasurer's push to divest money away from the for-profit prison system in Ohio. Ohio candidate for Treasurer Rob Richardson had been pushing for a platform of diversity and civil rights and bringing some relevancy to the Ohio State Treasurer office. Richardson says he wants to use the office to tackle the issue of for-profit prisons and believes we should instead shift the focus to true rehabilitation. So take a listen to what he had to say on AM Joy on MSNBC.
The reason why the state of Ohio is unfortunately one of the top incarcerating states is because we're incentivizing locking people up. You know, the state of Ohio by itself spends about $1.8 billion a year incarcerating people. And then when you look at our pension system, when you think about this idea that people, working men and women, are actually investing in something that is taking away opportunities for their kids. You know, we invest all this money. I think it should be divested, and I hope.
All right, we have Rob Richardson, Democratic candidate for Ohio Treasurer, joining me this morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so you've done some interviews that we just saw in the past where you say that you believe, and I want to quote this correctly here, that for-profit prisons have no functional role in government. Instead, they want to put profit ahead of safety. That's a quote I pulled from the Columbus Dispatch here. And you want to divest money away from for-profit prisons. Is this more of a moral obligation, or do we feel like it's more of an economical situation?
Well, I actually think it's both. So, from a fiscal point of view, let's just start there. You think about how much money our state spends, and we spend about $1.8 billion a year incarcerating people. And if we continue at the rate we are, we're about 130% at 130% capacity. If we continue at the rate locking up people that don't have to be locked up, we're going to have to either build a new prison or do more for-profit prisons, which is going to cost an additional $2 billion. So there's only so much resources. In the state of Ohio, we don't have a resource problem, we have a priority problem. If we want to actually invest in education, if we want to invest in infrastructure, if you want to invest in research, things that actually build opportunity for people, you have to stop investing in some things, and investing in prisons and investing in for-profit prisons is not the way to go, and I don't think it should be the priority for the long-term interest of the state of Ohio. You're talking about taking away resources. So for this to be a good return for pension funds, the state has to pay the cost. The state is not like this is a true private investment. The state is paying to put people away. And when you have for-profit companies, they push legislatures to make sure that they are filling up the jail so they can make their profits.
So now when you talk about the moral obligation side of this.
So the moral obligations is the fact that, you know, we know when people get into the criminal justice system, it's very hard to come out.
Yeah.
It's very hard.
Cycle.
It's a cycle.
Yeah.
You know, it's very hard to be able to get a job once you come out. And it's opportunities that are drained from people. So just morally, if you don't have to put people in prison, and instead, particularly those who have low-level drug offenses, who are just essentially addicts, and they get caught up in the system very easily.
Yeah.
It gets on your record. Then it becomes harder for you to take care of your family, and you can't get the treatment that you need. So it just doesn't work. I tell you what, if the only solution, if the main solution was to lock people up, we should be leading in terms of what we're doing with drug rehabilitation. But instead, we have one of the worst opioid crises in the entire nation. We're either 1 or 2, depending on the year, for deaths for overdoses. So it's not working.
No. So, I mean, well, tell me this. How would you be able to, I'm saying that you do take the office, how would you be able to get this done? Because, you know, as state treasurer, it doesn't really have the power to redirect state pension funds, from what we know. So, I mean, how would you be able to use your influence or to make something like that even happen?
Well, you said the key word, right? Just because you don't have complete direct control doesn't mean you don't have influence. And you have a ton as the chief financial officer. So, you have 2 powers. One, you appoint to each one of these pension boards. So I expect that anyone that I have on that board is going to be a partner in this. And there are some others that also have appointment power. Some other officers, the governor, I believe the AG does. And I believe some will have a like-minded approach to me too. Second, there are other people on that board. They're working people that are representatives of unions that I know align with the way I'm approaching this. So third, you have the power you have what's called custodial power. You get to determine what entity holds the money for each one of those pension funds, and so using those opportunities for partnership, collaboration, and really incentivizing these folks, I'm going to use that to do everything we can to actually move this forward. And you also have the power of the bully pulpit. Listen, you come from an office that has an executive power. I believe that that those pension funds will want to work with me in order to make sure we get this moving forward. And I think once they understand and we actually highlight this for the taxpayers are going to want to demand it, and I think we'll get cooperation for those reasons.
Now, we still have the issue, of course, of high incarceration rates here in Ohio. I think it's one of the highest in the country, if I'm not mistaken. So with the focus and just kind of going back to that moral obligation and rehabilitation of people who may have an opioid addiction, what do we do about that situation? Because I would expect that if you're going to tackle this one, just from the financial side of it, we have to figure out exactly how is it that we do get these people help if we're going to redirect these funds.
Well, so, you know, from any power of any office, you basically have three powers, particularly from an executive office like this. You have your statutory power, which is what you have in the law. Then you have the power of the bully pulpit, which I talked about. Then you also have the power to convene. So one of the things I'd like to do is actually do a fiscal impact analysis to see how our state compares, and we know how it compares, but what other states have done to reduce their prison population, to keep folks safe, and save and improve opportunities for people and save costs for taxpayers, and bring in people that have been experts in this. There are many organizations all across the state that have a vested interest in this, and I would also bring in law enforcement. I would bring in others to figure out how we do this, and then, you know, use the platform to push it forward. So, you know, I plan on using this office to, again, not just focus on the nuts and bolts, which we're going to do. We're going to be fiscally responsible, but you can be both fiscally responsible and socially responsible at the same time.
All right, Rob Richardson, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much.
All right, coming up, listen up. You guys have to hear about this. Changes to your FICO credit score could be on the way. We have an expert letting you know exactly how they're going to change the way that they give you a credit rating. That's coming up.